Perfect. So the first step to our picture today is we're going to paint the background first. And then once the background's painted, we're going to let it dry for about 30 seconds because it doesn't take too long to let the background dry. And then we're going to use our pencil. So if you don't have a pencil, grab one handy. If you don't have a pencil, you can grab a pen. We're going to do a little sketching on top of the background color. Okay. That worked well from a process perspective when I painted this before, but we'll go ahead and kick things off. We're going to spend about 15 minutes on the background and then move on. So one thing about painting is managing your time. And I usually do that for us, but I'm sharing that window because there's a lot of details I want us to get through. So we'll spend about 15-20 minutes on the background. I'll keep an eye on the time for us. So the background is going to consist of light blues, light greens, and some white. And now I'll show you my inspiration. I did some really fun light swirls in the background. Really, I want you to fill the background in any way that you want. I added some like light circular just to add a little bit of hue. In the inspiration, the background reminded me of like a blurred snowy scene. So for me, I liked using the blues and the greens a little bit, very light, as you can see, to just kind of fill that in. So one way of getting started is to take your blue paint and put a small dollop of blue paint on your palette or on your plate. Put the cover back on that. Grab a green. I'm going to put a small dollop, little dot of green. It's not very much at all. It's about a pinky's nail's worth dot of green. And you're going to grab your white. So the steps of the class that we're going to use white tonight is, and I'm just going to look around and make sure everybody's muted. All right, sorry, 1 minute here. Welcome, folks that just joined. All right, cool. So you're going to take, if folks could take a moment just to make sure you're muted, that would be awesome. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. I'm also searching for where it could be coming from. Okay, thank you. We're just going to take a dollop of white and we're going to put it over here on the side. I might do 2 dollops of white because we're going to do a light blue and we're going to do a light green mixture. And you're going to grab just a tiny dot of blue. Ooh, my paint is stuck. Let's see here. A tiny dot of blue. And I'll show you what to do. So you're going to grab your biggest brush. You can kind of wipe off some of the water. And I'm going to start with blue. I'm going to take the corner of the bristles. Look at that. And just grab a little bit of the light blue on the corner. I'm going to make a nice light blue color here. And if you need to go back and get a little bit more, the goal is to have the background be light in color. That's pretty good. I could make it a little darker. It's always better to start with a little less blue than a lot of blue. So that just got pretty dark for me. I'm probably going to add a little bit more white to it, but we can roll with that for right now. I'm going to steal a little bit of white from my neighbor. All right. So what you're going to do is last class, well, when I did this initially, I did some of these circular objects. I really liked this because it just added, and I blend this all in, but this just added some kind of fun flavor, some fun texture to the background. As the paint is wet, what I like to do is I like to dip my brush in a little bit of water, wipe off some of the droplets, and then move some of this paint around. So this is where I want you all to be a little bit abstract, a little bit courageous. And just the goal of this step is just to fill in your background any way that you want. So I'm just dipping my brush in a little water and I'm moving around the paint. That's all I'm doing. You can smooth out some of these brush strokes. I'm doing this quickly because I don't want my paint to dry. I want to stretch that blue pigment out in different areas, but you can see how nice and calming and smooth this is. you see any brush strokes, you can use water or even a little bit of white paint to fill this in. But just I'm doing circular brush strokes, but I might do some other brush strokes just to kind of fill in some of these spaces. You don't have to overthink this step, just fill in this background any way that you wish. That's really where we're going. And you can see how those smooth right out, but you can still see a little bit of texture per se. So I'm just gonna have some fun. We're gonna be doing a lot of different layering with colors in the background, even with some grays, just to kind of dull it out a little bit. So I like using water to help smooth it out a little bit. If you want to do, you can expand these circles. They can kind of blend into one. Try doing like a continuous brush stroke. They don't have to be circular. They could just bend a little bit. Kind of let yourself go a little bit as you're doing this. You don't need to be overly critical in this step because this is just the background. We're going to be putting a lot of stuff on top. So the reason I'm having fun with the circular texture is we can just paint the whole background blue. Like if you just wanted to do a light blue background, I am going to bring in a little bit of green, like a lighter green in a minute. But I am having fun thinking outside the box on how we fill in our backgrounds. I could have done just a blue sky, and that's fine. Absolutely fine. And if you want to make this really smooth, use a little water, mix a little bit more white paint in. We do need white paint for the snow, so you have plenty of white paint from me, but just keep in mind, we need a little bit of white paint for the snow, so don't use all of your white paint if you can help it. But I'm going to give everybody, we're going to have 15 full minutes to do this background. So if you feel like I'm zooming, I am just embracing the objective, and the objective is just to fill in the background. That's it. And art is all about layering, and the example of layering and to create a look or a scene is just knowing it's a part of the process. So sometimes we expect wham bam, the first thing you paint is going to look beautiful, but sometimes we let it dry and we go back in and we add a little bit more to it here and there. And that's the reflection piece of art. So you can see some objects up here, but they're a little more smooth. I like that. But find your own style. Any design, if you wanted to do a different design up here, you could. For me, I just want to fill in all of the white space, basically. And if you paint something you don't like, guess what? You can grab a little bit of white paint and look at, I can easily smooth out any of these swirls. Like if it dried too quickly, covering up is called modifying. That's how I refer it to in this class. We don't cover things up. We modify what we have. Some of you have probably heard me say that before. All right. So have some fun filling in this background. I will show you what it's like to add a little bit of a light green in here. I love adding a little bit of the light green. It kind of gives me a teal color a little bit, which always excites me. And maybe I'll take a little corner of this phthalo green and I'll mix it in with my white up here. Ooh, you could even mix a little bit of blue and green together. You don't want it too dark. Gives you a little bit of a seafoam color, just a little bit. And maybe I'll just dust this in some areas. And if it comes in too dark, guess what? I can just take a little water and blend it in. But I like having a little bit here, a little bit there. But I'm going to blend that in with a little water on my brush. Ooh. I always love showing you what it's like to be a little courageous in these classes, because this is a no risk environment here to try something new. If you don't like the green, you don't have to do it. You could also cover the green with a little bit of blue if you don't like it, or a little bit of white to kind of dye it down. I also did a little bit of a gray water wash on top of the whole thing to really make it kind of a snowy, kind of cloudy atmosphere. That was really fun. So I'll do a little bit of that at the end of our 15 minutes. If anybody wants to make a light gray water wash to kind of brush on top, it was really quite pretty. But you can be as playful as you wish. I really like the blue as the primary, but I had some fun bringing in a little bit of green. So you don't have to do a ton of green. The green will match with the holly that we'll paint in. And the background will be subtle. You can see it's very subtle. I'll bring it a little closer so you can see. I'm painting on acrylic paper tonight, so the texture looks a little different. But I'm using the same paints and everything, same brushes. If anyone ever has questions about supplies, if you want to paint more on your own, don't ever hesitate to reach out and ask. Happy to help. All right, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I'm going to give everybody, we'll spend a few more minutes. Just get some background color in. I'm going to go grab some more blue, and I'll show you what a gray water wash looks like on top of this. But my objective is just to fill the background. We're going to have a lot of holly like down here on the whole bottom half. The top part is like what you see the most. So, all right, so I'll look around the room, see how everybody's doing. Excuse me. All right. So for me, I'm just looking around my canvas to say, is there anywhere else I need to add a color? Down here, I need a little bit something. And I'm just gonna fill in down here in this space. If folks could check your microphones and make sure you're muted, that would be great. Thank you so much. All right, so I'll show you how to do the light gray water wash if anybody's interested. I love the muted gray on top because it just softens and kind of dulls the color down just a smidge. Let me just look around the room, make sure everyone is muted. I hear something, but I can't see. Okay, cool, we're good to go. So to make a gray, you're going to use a dollop of white. You don't need very much because we're actually going to add water to it. And a tiny dot of black. So you can take your black and you can kind of put a dot of black anywhere on your plate. Just a little tiny dot. You all are probably realizing the more you take these classes, I use very little paint in these classes, which is great. It just shows you don't need a lot. Using a tiny touch of black on the corner of my brush. And I'm going to mix a light gray here. I'm going to make it a tiny touch darker. It's better to start light. And this paint is fairly thick, so just take a minute and then embrace patience of mixing it. I call it mixing the pudding. You gotta make sure it gets a little thick up front, and then you mix it around and it smooths out just a little bit. So I have a little bit of a gray. What we're going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the gray kind of over here in a secondary area, and I'm going to put a few dollops of water in it. And I'm going to create a water wash. Watery, milky, kind of like structure. The more water you add, the less opacity, the less paint pigment your brush will hold. And I want a loose gray cover that I can put on top of some of the blues and greens. So I can still see the blues and greens come through. And I've been wiping off some of the paint, wiping off some of the water. So my brush just has a little bit of water on it and a little bit of that gray paint and water mixture. So you can see there's hardly any on here. And I'm just going to do, ooh, this is dark. So you can see it covered it. If it's too thick if you try this, you can do some brush strokes down. You can also use a corner of a paper towel. This is a great tip. You can grab a piece of paper towel, and while it's wet, I usually grab a size that's like the size of the palm of my hand, 3 by 3, and you can do some smudging. Try not to, if it wipes it off, if you go hard, it will wipe the paint off your canvas. But if you don't go that hard, it may not. You could do some smudging if your paper towel is a little wet. So wet your paper towel first. I just destroyed partially this corner because I didn't wet my paper towel first. But if you wanted to do some smudging with a little bit of a wet paper towel, you could. It's kind of fun. And you could even dip the corner. Oh, you have somebody else joining. You could dip the corner of your paper towel into this like watery gray mixture. And you can use that to also spread it around, which is what I did on the inspiration. I dipped the corner, so wet paper towel, dip the corner of it into my watery gray mixture. And I'm kind of doing a little bit of a soft gray wash on top. It just adds this subtlety. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But I really like the way it looks. So I'm going to give us all just 2 more minutes to finish the background, and then we'll transition to our drawing element of the class. And if you just joined us, don't worry, we're just painting the background, blues and greens.
You're very little late, so Tala and Marwan's estimate stays put.
If anyone has any questions, please let me know. Welcome to who just joined. And I'll have folks mute themselves as they join. But we're just taking a few minutes to fill in the background, and then we're going to be drawing our composition and on top. So for me, I'm using a wet paper towel just to smudge a little bit of this gray on top. For me, it's just a little bit of a subtlety. I like the gray personally. If you don't like it, it's okay. You can kind of modify. And if anyone needs help,
so
please.
far, hi. So far, mine looks nothing like yours.
Oh, well, that's not supposed
to. Okay.
It's not supposed to. Any way that you fill the background works. So don't worry.
Okay, it's lovely. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. This class is all about going with the flow and completing the objective at hand. And the objective was just painting the background. So any way you wanted to do that is fine. We take a look at each step along the way for what it is. And we are never overly critical, ever, right? So I'm here to remind us of that. All right, I'm here to lighten the load, but I love the gray on top. I don't know if anybody else likes it. Maybe it's just me. It's okay. Art's an individual thing, so all good. But I'm going to let that dry. And in 1 or 2 minutes, we're going to start the drawing aspect. So when you're ready, say, I'm Megan, I'm done with the background. Put your brush down. Give it a good 30 seconds to dry, and we're going to draw the birds on top. Our composition of the holly bush and all those things. So mine's drying. I use a little bit of water, so it's a little wet in areas. Acrylic paint dries pretty quickly, so I'm almost there. But as that's drying, I'm just going to clean off my brushes. If you're enjoying tea, water, wine, I'm enjoying my tea tonight. Cleaning these right around. All right. And again, a big thanks to AARP Vermont for having us. They're wonderful partners. They have incredible resources and incredible team. And a big thanks. We would not be here tonight without them, without their support. So thank your local AARP Vermont and state leadership. All right, so this is drawing. I'm going to be drawing the composition tonight with a Sharpie because I'm courageous. No, really, because so you can see my lines. Some of you may have already drawn lines for maybe some of your birds. Again, here's our inspiration. What we'll be doing in this next step is kind of drawing where we want our bushes to be and then where we want our birds to be. We'll be drawing the birds and the placement of the birds first, and then we'll kind of draw the bush underneath them because the birds are the featured point, right? And then the bush can just happen kind of underneath. So I will be teaching you how to draw a bird, at least draw the shape and the form of the bird. And then the bird will come to life with our paint, really. If you're inspired to paint one bird, you may paint one bird. If you want to paint a family of birds on a holly bush, you may paint a family of birds. You can choose. So you can break the rules. You can embrace your own ideas for these next parts. I will always encourage you to, if you want to do something a little bit different, feel free to do that. You should have enough cues and enough tips to kind of work through that based on my approach. So your canvas is drying, but I'll talk through some of the objectives as we get going here. So for me, I am going to do two birds, and I like to use my hands. I'm a visual person, so talking about placement. So for me, the birds are the focal piece. So I want them to be fairly in the middle of the canvas. So we talk about this. So you don't paint one bird in the middle, and then you have another bird over here on the side. If you think about where you want the position of your two birds can be, you can actually be thoughtful about the positioning. So for me, if I do one bird a little higher where my Sharpie is, and I do another bird down here, they're kind of floating in the middle, but they'll be on a branch, right? So they're kind of be here. So if I target my first bird to be a little higher than my midway point, maybe to the left a little bit of my midway, a little higher than mid, kind of like where this circle is right here. That's kind of where I want my bird to be. And we'll talk about the head and we'll talk about the body in just a minute. So here's me being courageous with my Sharpie. To draw any object at all, you can use a circle, a square, or a rectangle to draw anything. So imagine our bird has a rounded body. We're not going to draw a perfect orange circle. That wouldn't work for the shape of a bird, but we could do an oval for the bird's body and a small circle for the head. And that allows us to put the bird where we want it to go. We can start to figure out the size of the bird. Now this bird's pretty healthy, and you can actually see my Sharpie lines behind the bird, which is actually probably good for learning purposes. But you can see how my bird got a little bigger on the inside and it got a little bigger on the outside because the back of the neck. So you can keep some of those details in mind, but you can see I put an oval on the inside of this bird and I put a little bird head. That's where we started for our shapes. So we'll do that now together. So my bird is going to be kind of here, and the bird's body, this one's going to be fairly up and down. So I'm just going to be courageous and do an oval for the body. And these lines don't matter that much. For me, I'm doing a Sharpie. I'm going to be able to change this. And then I'm going to put a small bird's head on top. No, so most of you are using a pencil. I'm going to put a small beak over here as a triangle. So bird's body, it looks like a small child. That's okay. I'm going to bring this bird to life a little bit, so don't worry too much. So work on a little bit of a bird's oval body, and we're going to build upon this drawing together. So for me, the beak is on the right side of the head, and there's a little bit of a triangle on the top of the bird's head because of these feathers. Now, if you don't want to draw a triangle, you don't have to, but the triangle helps because the back of the bird's body kind of comes down straight. So you can draw a fairly straight line, kind of curving by the shoulders to round out the back of the bird's body. And this will all come together. So under the beak, maybe it comes out, the chest is a little puffy, but then the bird's body may come down. And you can start to connect the forms. And then the tail will come out a little straight. And the tail is fairly narrow in height. But this is where you can start to see the exterior lines to help form and shape the body of the bird. And you can reshape your lines to reshape your bird. Now under the beak comes out. You can always change these lines. Now for me, I'm looking at the line down the tail is straight. You can always repainting this in. So this is going to evolve a little bit. But the tail is long. It could be long or short. these are kind of a little bit longer here. We'll be painting this bird in red. So I'm not going to get too crazy with the details of the head feathers or the wings yet. If you wanted to do a little bit of a wing halfway on the body to kind of connect it to the tail, you could do a wing shape if you wanted to. If that helps you. We can always modify the bird's body, but this is just really a starting place. Looks like a dunce cap on top of the bird. It's kind of funny. All right. So as you're working on that bird, we're going to put the second bird in. And my second bird's going to be pretty close. And this bird's on a little bit of an angle. So this body is pretty straight up and down. If I do a straight line, the bird's standing up pretty straight. This bird's going to be leaning and looking at his friend over here. So I'm saying, okay, how big do I want this body to be? This oval shape is going to be on a little bit of an angle. Looks like a little potato with a head on top, a little circle on top. And the beak is going to be on the left side. So he's looking at his friend. Well, this is a female bird. The female cardinals are a little lighter in color. The male cardinal is red, but you can pick and choose what you want to paint these. And this bird also has a triangle on top of its head for its mane. And some of you probably know the correct words for these birds' features. Please feel free to jump in and correct me at any time. No offense taken. So I'm doing this triangle on top, and I'm going to follow the line from the back of the head down to round the back of the body. Look at this. A single line, look at that, to round the back of the neck, to round to connect to the back of the body. And my tail is going to come out down here, maybe at the same angle. And the tail can kind of be in the middle of the body. It doesn't matter too much. I'll do it on the bottom side. And if you wanted to give this bird a little wing, you could. I can always reshape the bird as I paint, so I'm not too worried about that. And the wing doesn't need to go up as high as mine. It can go about halfway. So if I cover this up with my finger, you can see that. And my birds are fairly up high. I like that there's space on the left and the right side of the canvas. So that has already happened. And then I like drawing a little bit of a stick for these birds to sit on. So I'm just going to draw a line, a double line underneath them for the stick of holly. This is a bush of holly that we're drawing. So this is something where they're sitting on. We'll do two sticks. This is one branch here that they're sitting on, and I'll do another branch over here, kind of coming from the right. And this is where we design the composition of our picture. So this is where you can kind of pause and you can reflect on your bird's body sizes, the positioning. If you need to change any of those elements, feel free to do that now. But we will take another 5 to 10 minutes or so to draw some of the holly on. That was really helpful to get on some of that concept now, because then we can just fill in some of those elements. So as you're working on your birds, if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Again, you have those triangles on top of the head. You have a bird oval-like body, a bird circle-like head. You have a beak on each bird. The direction of the beak is the direction of where they're looking. And then you have your tails. The holly is going, holly probably has more than 5 points. I made an assumption that the holly has 5 points, and because that's kind of how I was drawing it. But holly has these spiky points, and we're going to do different size holly leaves, and we're going to draw them on. Now I'm layering them in. They do not need to be all big. Some could be small, and I'm kind of doing a little bit of a swoop here and there. Some can be wide, some can be small. But take a few minutes, and I'm layering some holly in. I'm doing some on the right side, some on the left. And on the end of this holly bush, I'll just do one kind of big piece of holly. Swooping in. But I'm starting to create this foliage for the holly bush. And these are branches of the bush. Holly may be a tree too. I'm assuming it's a bush, but please correct me if you know. But I'm going to just alternate from the left to the right side of this branch with holly. So I'm using a Sharpie so you can see it. But you want your holly to be all different sizes because big and small, my holly is all over the place. It's okay though. I'm embracing the process here. There, that one looks a little bit more natural. I'm layering a second piece of holly kind of behind each of these just to add, and maybe I'll add a little piece of holly in between some of these just to fill out the bush a little bit. So you can see I did one piece on the end, kind of like end capped the bush. And then I did a big piece of holly here, which looks more like a geometric object. And then I did a little one right here. But from leaning back, kind of looks like an abstract holly bush, you know, from afar. All good. Again, we're not being too critical of our holly here. But I want you to fill in the holly. The goal is I want it to still see some of the background in between. And we're going to add little berries along the way too. So where you have some spaces, you're going to add a cluster of 3 and be on top of the holly. To be next to it. Little holly berries kind of tucked in. So I did 1, I did 3, I did 2, I did 3, I did 1, I did 2. You're going to do that along the way. So we're going to take a few minutes here to draw in some of the holly. We don't always do that in these classes, but it's a nice opportunity to get some of the objects down before we just put paint on. Now, if anybody wants to skip this step, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Feel free. But I am just being really courageous and getting some holly on. Some are a little taller. Some are a little longer. And I'm just doing these radical swoops and then adding a couple holly berries here and there. 1, 2, 3. The holly berries will be painted brilliant red, just like our male cardinal. But I'm going to do the same thing up here. So I'm going to do some holly underneath this bird. Just doing some swoops. These remind me of like, I'm calling them like umbrella swoops in my head. I don't know why. Like the underside of an umbrella swooping in. And I'm layering holly leaves behind this holly. So I'm kind of layering them in. And we can add more holly in as you get painting. You'll know and you'll see visually where you might have gaps. So don't worry too much about that. And you can do as much of this sketching now as you wish. Sometimes it's fun to mix things up in these classes. Do a little bit more drawing, a little more sketching. Because when you paint on your own, sometimes people have an idea in their head on what they want to do and they draw it out first. Some of you in this class do that, and I appreciate that. So it's good to offer you different solutions and approaches for you to figure out what works best for you. And I'm going to do a second piece of holly kind of coming over here. So I'm just doing enough. Again, I'm adding in a berry or 2 along the way. So I kind of have a berry, and kind of staggering them on both sides of the branches. And you can see I'm kind of creating a scene, a little bit of a scene here. I may add some more holly to kind of fill in this gap in the middle, just to make it a little bit more full of a bush, but I'm going to do that after. And I was courageous here with my Sharpie. I'm going to put the Sharpie away because I know I can do everything else with paint. Many of you are using pencil. And this is where we really all can go at our own speed. So if anybody wants to take like another 5 minutes to do some more drawing, feel free to do that. For anyone that wants to jump in with the paint, you can jump in with the paint with me now. We're going to start with our red. And this is more relaxing. You can think a little less when we fill in our bird and we fill in our we fill in our berries. But we're going to start with our red paint. And you can do a dollop of red on your plate. And I'm going to grab my number 3 brush. If you have a 3 or a 4 or a 5, any of those brushes will work well. We're going to fill in the bird first. So just make sure your brush is nice and clean. We're filling in the bird on the left, or any bird that you want to be red. Feel free to do that. And this paint again is a little thick, so just take a minute to stir it around. Perfect. All right, and then we're just gonna have some fun. So we're gonna fill in the bird together. I always like to start at the head, kind of work my way down. Around the beak, we're gonna leave around the beak a little bit blank because we're gonna be putting in black anyway, so there's no need to fill that in. You may do 2 coats of red, you may see your pencil. You can absolutely do a second coat after, but this first coat's important. Covers up the background, and then the bird will really start to jump off the screen. If there's any questions, don't hesitate to ask, but we're just using our red to fill in our male cardinal on the left. But you can use any colors that you wish at any point.
I'm sorry, I think I missed this. But what did you mix your red with white?
Just red. I'm using just
red.
brilliant
Oh.
red. Exactly.
Just do it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. No worries. I'm just filling in the red. Nice smooth brush strokes from the top of the bird down. I'm doing vertical brush strokes to fill in the bird. So satisfying to fill in. Nice and smooth, and take your time. In these classes, everyone works at their own pace. There are a lot of details to this class. So especially the holly filling in the green takes a few minutes. So this is where this class it's controlled and moderated, but it's going to give you some time just to really unwind and have a little patience with the process. It will be worth it, I promise. And I'm just going down the tail. If you need to use a smaller brush to stay within the lines, feel free to downsize to a smaller brush at any time. And I'm using a number 3. I think I can paint all my berries with the number 3, but if you need to downsize, my bird is going to dry with the red paint. But I am going to fill in all my berries with red while I have red paint on my brush. Now you want to stay in between the lines. We will add a little bit of depth to the berries after. I may use a smaller brush actually, so I'm a little bit more refined here. Unless you're really careful with the tip. Now with the Sharpie, you'll be able to see all of my details pretty clearly, but when you add color to yours, it's really going to help. Your objects are really going to come forward, which is really nice. And the berries are just small red circles. We like to keep it nice and easy. And I did them all fairly the same size. I was not striving for perfection. I was just painting or drawing, in this case, small circles. It's not going to matter. Some artists would add depth and light and dark colors to each object. That's where these paintings just look so realistic, because artists take the time to really add light and to add shading to highlight an underside of an object. We'll do some of that tonight, but that takes hours and hours. And I'm sure many of you, we've done some of that in these classes. But tonight's really focused on all of these details, all these leaves, all these berries. And we always start with a base coat. For anything that we paint, everything has a base color. Then we make it a little fancy as we go.
1.3.
Okay. Was there a question? Oh, maybe not. All right. Just looking around the room. All right, everybody's doing well. Again, don't hesitate to ask if you have any questions along the way, but we're just painting our bird red and painting our berries red. That's it. I have lots of berries. You can always add berries like towards the end too. For me, it didn't interrupt the process by adding them early. But everyone processes and approaches art differently. And let me tell you, I know what it's like to do things different. My husband and I have two different mind tracks. He does things one way and I do things another way. So I respect his way of doing things, and I respect your way of approaching art if you would do things differently. So just know you're not going to offend me if you would have done something different, or if you want to do a different step. So you can always go at your own pace. All right. So as you're working on the red, clean off your brush when you're done with the red. We're just doing a simple base coat of the red. And this is the artist's quiet time that we all have been yearning for. This is the moment. I appreciate silence. I hope you all do too. Even though your home may not be silent, but it's this peaceful time to work on details that you all can do. And again, keep your brushes clean as you go. I'm going to be using a smaller brush for the holly, so I have a little bit more control over what I'm doing. So I'm going to use a number 1 brush for the holly, or this 2/0 fraction brush. These look so similar to me, just a small brush of your choice. A brush that has a nice tip on it. You all receive brand new brushes, and many of you have a collection of brushes going now. Just find one that has a nice, clean, small tip for our holly. And we'll transition to doing the holly. We're just filling in the holly green. So if you're still working on your berries, don't worry. But we all likely have that dollop of green paint. And you can go ahead and take your small brush and kind of work that around so it opens up a little bit. And I want you to make a color of holly that you like. So the colors that I used was I did a dollop of white and a dollop of black, just to change the tone of the green. So using that small brush, make a color green that you enjoy, that you want for this holly. I had a little bit of gray up here that I was just tapping into. I'm gonna add a little bit of that gray in here. It's just lightening this green. It's a beautiful, warm emerald green. And I want you to make enough of it. So sometimes in these classes, we paint a lot of things and we run out of it. And we got to try to mix the same tone. Many of you have heard this saga before. Take a little bit more green, make enough of this to paint all of your holly. So I'm going to grab another dollop of green. I'm going to put a little bit more white in.
Megan, do you have a fix to remove the pencil mark? Because it's different where my bird actually came out.
If your bird shape has changed and you see a pencil, you could try to erase the pencil line gently.
That didn't work.
Okay. If that does not work, then you can just find like that light blue background color and just paint over it with that background color.
Okay.
Yep. That background color is your eraser. It will blend right in, so don't worry too much. Yep. So if you ever need to cover lines or reshape a bird even further down the class here, you could do that. I'm going to add a little bit more black I want to ground this a little bit. We are going to create 2 tones of this green, a darker green and a darker green on top of this. So I just want like a nice solid, I don't want this to be a light green. You can see it's fairly medium bodied in color. That's what I want. I don't want this to be any lighter than this because I want it to stand out from the background. So I'm just going to start with this base color green first. So I mixed a little bit of white, a little bit of black, and some of the emerald, this phthalo green. I call this emerald. It's really quite pretty. Excuse me. And then the next step is just filling in all of your holly leaves. So taking your time. This is going to take a solid 15 minutes. So this is where you can all get in your little Zen painting zones and using a small brush, filling in each of the holly. Solid green color. And you can start at the top. You want these nice points on the holly. And if your holly's overlapping, you can use a little bit darker of a color or even outline the holly with a darker line to make it stand out. So I'll do that in a minute. This holly is overlapping.
Already.
Oh,
And
you
you
got
outline it.
Megan, did you say green, black, and white?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Just mix the color that you like. That's the most important thing. And then we're just filling in each piece of holly. And this is where the whole composition will just jump off the page. You can also paint the stick. Well, I use a little bit of brown and a little green. So if you wanted to paint this branch itself green first, I added a little bit of a brown on top of it. You could do that, but paint around your little berries. Using a small brush will give you control. Just take a couple deep breaths and enjoy the process. And if your holly's overlapping, you could use a black or a darker green just to kind of outline each piece on top of one another. That works well. We will add a little bit of dark green to each holly, but we'll do that after. But if you wanted to do any outlining along the way, feel free. And as we're painting our holly, I will share, I am offering watercolor classes now separate from AARP Vermont. Some of you have expressed interest in doing different types of classes. You can follow my Facebook page if you're not on Facebook. I'm going to be putting it on my website soon. I can also send you some more information via email. So if you're interested in doing any watercolor classes, I have partnered with an incredible woman in New York City. Her name is Azadeh. She's from Iran and she's incredibly talented, has 20 years of artist experience, and she's a lovely person. And she's leading watercolor classes for me, and she is wonderful. And I typically attend those water classes too. So if anybody's interested in doing something a little different in addition to the AARP classes, please stay in touch. But I will never email you outside of the AARP events because they're a wonderful partner. I respect your information. But we're just filling in each bit of holly. And this is what's going to bring our scene to life. I also encourage you to check out all the other AARP Vermont events that they offer and resourcing. They have a ton of different stuff. Really wonderful things. All right. Few deep breaths. Always nice. It's incredible what a little bit of peace and quiet. Again, don't be too critical of your holly. You can always reshape these leaves if you wish. But this is where we're just slowing down, filling in each piece. Don't be overly critical of the shape. You can always change the shape of this holly. Always, always. And we'll fill in that second bird after. to just dance from one holly leaf to another. And again, don't hesitate to downsize to a different brush if your brush isn't working. If you feel like you're going outside of your lines, I'm here to remind yourself it's okay to switch brushes. I feel like I'm getting messy in some areas. It's okay. Especially painting around these dainty little berries. Take your time, stay in your groove. And we'll reflect on the overall composition once we're done painting this holly. And what I mean by that is you may want to add more holly along the way. My recommendation is to paint what you have if you did sketch things. If you didn't sketch things, then you can kind of lean back and fill in. But I like filling in what I have first in this instance, and then filling in gaps where I might need another piece of holly. Especially in this middle area, I tended to add another piece here or there on the underside of the birds to fill in the bush, because I don't want just 2 branches with just holly on them. I want to create this illusion like the birds are sitting on the top of this more full bush. So we'll do more of that, but I'm just sharing that as a little bit of insight. So just paint what you have. Don't feel like you need to add more right now. You don't need to. If you want to, you can, of course. But don't feel obligated to evolve as you go. We can do that after as a group. Sometimes it's nice knowing that we will be doing that. So you don't need to do that now. And it's nice to have permission just to fill in the lines. Color inside the lines if you did that approach. It's where all your hard work pays off, although the time that we spent up front on drawing. It's a great exercise. Filling in the branch also will help ground the composition. And as we're painting, I can also share with you what we'll be painting with AARP in the upcoming months. This should excite you all. So for the month of January, we are painting cardinals. February, we're going to be painting birch trees. Beautiful, bright birch tree scene. We're not doing a winter birch tree scene. Why would we do that in winter? I'm mixing it up for us here. We'll also, in March, we'll be painting a beautiful waterfall, outdoor waterfall scene with a beautiful bright sky and some pine trees and a water basin with a waterfall, rock waterfall in the middle. Be beautiful. In April, we're going to be painting a really fun, different cloud type of scene with beautiful sun rays. And I think that'll be a little more challenging, but we're all going to do that together. And we can do it, but it's something a little different, and I hope it's going to be rewarding for us. I think it will be. And I've actually selected May as well. We're going to be doing a beautiful sunset water scene. It's more of an intimate water scene where it's not necessarily in the distance. We're going to be a little bit more up close, and we've never really painted waves together. So we're going to be playing with different blue and orange and yellow tones to create waves with a sunset reflection on top. So that'll be quite fun. So that's what I've planned for the next few months. I encourage you to register with AARP Vermont on their website. I will be sending these inspirations to them over the next couple weeks so they can be posting those events as they need to. So they'll be prepared to do that. And if you ever can't get into an AARP Vermont art class like this, I encourage you to contact me. I will put my email in the chat below, but also on the piece of paper that I send you has a link to my website, has my phone number, and it has my email's information is on my website. So you can contact me through there. But I'm so excited to share with you a little bit of a sneak peek on what's coming next. And if anyone has feedback on things you want to paint in the future outside of those items, please let me know. I always like to challenge us, but continue to have variety in these classes. But open to other ideas always. But we're going to continue to paint the holly together. And painting each branch as well. And again, if you need to downsize your brush, some of these holly points can be really tiny. So just being patient with the process. Tonight's class will likely be a full 2 hours. If you can't attend, again, if you need to leave early, I understand. I will be recording tonight's class and able to share that recording with you upon request. But the trick of downsizing brushes, I wish someone told me that when I was painting and starting to learn to paint, or even if you paint often, it's a good reminder just to change things up if you need to. Sometimes we get in the zone and we just use what we have, make work. But if we get to some really tiny places, it's really convenient to switch brushes just for a minute. And if anybody happens to paint over or next to any of these little berries, you can always go grab some red paint after and refine any of these berry shapes. So don't worry too much about those berries. We'll make sure those stand out at the end. And if your holly, again, is overlapping one another, you can use a darker green to outline any of these objects. And if you wanted to add as a level 2 tip to bring this holly to life, we can add a little bit of dark green to some of these holly leaves. We'll do that after, just to stay in sync with our efforts. And we will add more holly in. We'll have that reflective part of class that I talked about. We may want to fill in some gaps. If you want to lean back in your chair and reflect now, if you want to add in any more holly, feel free. You really want to have some big pieces of holly, some longer pieces, some shorter pieces. You can even put a little piece in between, right? I have a little kind of a 2-point holly right there with a kind of a curve. Just helps fill that gap in. So feel free to even use your pencil. Say, okay, I want to add another piece of holly here to help balance or complete a space within your composition. You could do that. But we're all going at our own pace, filling in our scene. And if you want to put on your favorite music or grab a cup of tea or a snack, this is something we're doing all at our own pace right now. Some of you may be behind me, some of you may be ahead of me. Doesn't matter. Just go at your own pace. I have a lot of holly. I don't know if anybody else has as much as I do, but I have a lot. So it just takes a few minutes, and that's okay. Okay. Very detail oriented, a lot of details. Not all of our classes are this detail oriented, but it's good to mix it up a little bit. Sometimes we do simple scenes. Sometimes we do things that are a little more complex, but you can always know, and you can always join with confidence that will get you through our inspiration. You can do it. I promise you that.
Excuse me, Megan.
Yes, ma'am.
How is the brown made?
Yep, brown is made. There's 2 ways to make brown. You can mix red, yellow, and blue all together.
Okay.
Or you can make an orange first, which typically sometimes works better by making an orange first. And to make orange, you're going to use your ochre with a tiny touch of red. Like a little red is going to go a long way. But making an orange first and then adding blue to your orange will allow you to get the right tone of brown.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And that brown will come in handy for our bird, our second bird as well. So I will show folks how to make that brown That was upon request. I'll show you how to do that. I do like adding a little bit of brown to the branch, just makes it look a little bit more natural. So we'll add a little bit of a brown line to the top of the branches, to the line, top of the line of the branches. Very easy, but it looks great. I'm almost done this holly. Almost. Only 12 more pieces to go. No, I'm just kidding. All right. If anybody wants to make that brown, feel free. Again, any special requests for the future, do not hesitate to ask. Okay. And after we're done the holly, we'll let it dry. We'll add a little bit of dark green after, but we'll make a brown as our next step, and we'll start to work on the base colors of our bird. So our order of operation will be to get our base colors of our holly in, which is what we're doing now, filling in our branches with this green, because we'll do a little bit of brown accenting. So getting our holly colors, then we'll mix a brown. And then we will paint in our second bird using our ochre and our white and our red, because we'll be making a couple of orangish red tones on top of the ochre to bring our second bird to life. And we'll do snow as one of our most final steps. So we'll put snow on top of our holly, and it is so beautiful adding snow on top of our holly. Really makes a scene. Okay, so I'm looking around my canvas saying, did I miss any holly? And guess what I did? I missed one right here. Excuse me. So if your holly needs any second coats, don't worry, you can always do that after. But getting the base coats down is important. So when you're done your green, I want you to clean your brush. And sometimes I get paint just below the bristles, and it's helpful to kind of grab a paper towel to kind of clean off that goop. This paint can be pretty thick, so it's good to just use a paper towel just to kind of clean off the top of the brush at the base of the bristles. Don't hesitate to stretch your shoulders back, maybe stretch your neck gently from the left to the right. Just check in with yourself. If you need to take a break or if you need to get a cup of tea, feel free to take that time for yourself. I'll always be here, but you can always take a break as you need to. And I'm going to show you how to make a brown for the branches. And we'll also use that brown with some of this bird too. So I'm going to talk you through the technique of making an orange first. I think it's an easier way of making brown personally. But we'll be using this yellow ochre. And you can use any size brush that you want really for the brown. Just maybe like a 3 maybe, or a 1, any smaller size brush. You're doing a dollop of your yellow. What brush is this? I'll use this one. Doesn't matter. Smaller size. And you're just going to grab a tiny touch of red, like a little tiny bit of red. Start with a little red. You can always add more. We're making an orange with our ochre. Little red goes a long way. Mix that in with a little patience. Grab a little bit more red. You don't have to worry about cleaning your brush. Just stick it back in the red and grab a little bit more. Take a minute to stir this in so the color actually changes. So I'm teaching you all how to make a brown, a little red with a little ochre, making an orange first. There we go. It's always better to start with a little bit of red versus going gung-ho and crazy. I talk through that. I feel like half the time though, I always still add too much red. So I'm just still not listening to myself. I'm gonna grab just a little bit more. And then I'm gonna grab a small touch of blue, and you can control the brown based on the blue. So this is a really nice color. So if you even wanted to grab some of this, this is a great color for our bird. If you want to even grab like a little dollop of this and just save it for later, do that. But I'm going to grab a little bit of blue and mix it with my orange to make the brown. And it doesn't even need to be like a firm brown. If you wanted to make it a little darker, you don't need to. This is kind of like a greenish brown, which is fine. This is just an accent color we're going to put on top of the branch. So it's kind of a greenish brown. It's not a very it's kind of a pukey color. It's not like a nice color, but it's a natural color that you would find in nature. So it would work well for the top of the branch. But if you really don't like it, you can change it up. You could add a tiny touch of black to it to darken it if you wanted to do that. You do you, but I'm going to use that as is. And I'm going to do a thin line. Again, I'm using like a number 1 brush. On top of the branch, on one side of the branch, I'm just going to do a line of brown just to kind of add a little bit more of a branch like tone to this. It's kind of an accent. And I'm just doing a line on top of, like on the top side of the branch. You can see I did it on this top branch. Just to add that warm woody color to the branch. It's just a detail, not a requirement. Adds a little bit more warmth. Okay. So mixing a brown, putting a little bit of brown on the top of the branch. Perfect. I'm going to clean my brush off when we're done. We're going to fill in our bird next. So we're going to use ochre and white paint. A little bit of ochre in a new spot. And a tiny touch of white just to soften the ochre, just a touch. This ochre is very yellow. If you paint it just on your bird, which I did initially, it works. But and you can use a number 1, a 2, or whatever brush size you want to fill the bird in. You can grab any brush. But I like adding a little bit of white to it just to soften it first. And then I can always add darker colors to the bird. But I liked having a little bit lighter of an ochre as a base coat for the entire bird first. So I'm just still like, it's kind of like turns the ochre into like a little bit more of a lighter mustard color, which I think is nice. Basically going to fill the bird in entirely with this color. So once you have white and ochre mixed together, you can paint your entire bird, fill it in as a background color, just like we did the red bird up top. Cover your lines. You may want to do 2 coats. Just take your time. And I'm going to leave a little bit of space around the bird's beak because we're going to put black there anyway, so we might as well save it. And we will make this bird a little more orangey. So we'll do that in a minute here. But starting with this base coat really just helps to ground the bird. The orange and the brown. We'll do a little red on the wing and a little bit of red and orange on the head. It's quite fun. And while the paint is wet, you can certainly bring oranges in. It's up to you, but we'll do more of that in just a minute here. So I'm really just filling in this bird. The right side of this bird is going to be lighter than the left side. So for the second bird, the belly is on the right side. And we're actually going to add a little bit of white and ochre to kind of soften this side of the body. So while the ochre and the white is wet on the right side of this bird's body, I'm just doing a nice smooth brush stroke from the top of the head down around the belly to the back side of the tail. If I grab a little bit of white paint, watch this. While the paint is still wet, I put a little bit of white paint on my brush. Uh-oh, did I get my elbow? Nope, I'm good. And doing a little bit of white on the belly of this bird. And I'm going to blend it into the ochre while it's wet. So I'm doing a little bit of a white line. This is going to highlight the belly of the bird. See that? If anybody wants to do that, feel free. This is creating a little bit of depth, a little bit of lightness. All right. I just lightened it just a little bit. So now this is where you can have some fun. If you saved any of that orangish color, look at this. You can bring in, if you even wanted to mix a little of your ochre with a little bit of this orangish color, you can play with blending your colors here. But as you get to the wing, you can actually start to use little brush strokes, maybe outline the wing with an orange. But you can start to use the orange to fill in the wing, little tiny feather-like brush strokes. If you already put yellow on the wing, totally fine. But use the orange to create some darker feathers on the bird. You can use more of a reddish orange. You could bring in, I'll do a little bit of a reddish orange in a minute, but I'm just doing a little bit of the orange on the ochre first. And you can just use the tip. This is where you want to slow down, kind of speed up. You want to make sure you're using a small brush for these details. And you're just doing little gentle sweeps, maybe on this side of the wing, maybe on the head, a little bit of orange on the head. On the right side of the head, or sorry, on the left side of the head, it's a little darker, like he's looking at his friend. You could get a little crazy, get a little bit of red and bring in your red with your little orange, and you can mix red and orange together too. So I'm showing you what it's like to experiment with blending colors. This is where you get some of those more realistic details. So you have red, you have orange, and you have this yellow. So you could mix your yellow and orange for this intermediary color. And you can also mix your red and your orange for this. So this is where you want to play with your darker tones, like your oranges and your red, orange, and your red, to add tiny little feathers to this bird. And I'm using the tip of the brush, and I'm just using gentle little brush strokes. And I'm adding, you can even add a little bit of darker orange or red to this wing. Just be open-minded and experiment with this step. That's what I'm encouraging. Little brush strokes, so you're creating little feathers as you work your way down. And the tail is also going to be orange or orangish red. So you can actually fill the tail in with an orange. It's a little darker. I'm going to put a little bit of red on top of the tail too. We'll do that after. See how the tail's a little darker? It's a little shaded, right? And the head can be a little, it doesn't have to be yellow. The yellow is a base coat for this bird. But the orange and these beiges, you can really control what you want this bird to look like. You can be as soft, you could be as textured as you want with little feathers. You don't need a lot of paint on your brush. If you want to go heavy paint, sure, feel free. But you don't need to go heavy paint. I love using a little bit of this orange and a little bit of this red mixed together. A little bit of red on this bird is really quite pretty too. So don't hesitate to add in a little bit of red. I like adding a little bit of red on the top of his head. These these feathers kind of coming off the back. You can do as much or as little as you wish. And the beak of these birds can be orange. So you can paint the beak of both of these birds orange. And orange again is ochre with a tiny touch of red. So you can paint the beak of both of these birds. And we'll do a highlighting touch on top of these after, but if you wanted to paint the beaks, this is where our birds start to come to life a little bit. You can kind of reshape your beaks if you want to. But basic orange colored beaks work well. And this is where you can see your birds are starting to look at each other. This is where they really start to come to life. And we'll put the black around their faces in just a few minutes, but play with these colors. Just want to make sure your birds are filled in any way that you wish. And you can kind of pause and you can come back to them. Just doing little brush strokes. I'm gonna add a little bit more red. Show you what a little bit of red looks like on this second bird. So I could outline the wing with a red line. Look at this. Ooh, there's its wing right there. And I could outline the left and the right side of the wing if I wanted to. So if you really want to make that stand out, you could. You could also put a little bit of red on the tail as well. Just a little bit of red. This adds a little bit of contrast. You can even mix in a little bit of orange. You could add some feather-like brush strokes on the tail. This is where we could all spend, hours just playing with these details. I'm going to encourage you to do as much or as little as you wish here. I've seen folks paint this before with really simple details as well as some really very specific details. So just pick and choose what you want, what you feel comfortable with. I'm going to put a little bit, I have Sharpie lines, so I'm going to put a little bit more paint on my yellow bird, on my lighter bird. We'll do the black detail for the face in just a minute. That will help tremendously. But I'm going to put a little bit more yellow paint on this bird just to cover up some of these black lines. There we go. And this paint is thick enough. It does a pretty good job with the second coat. Even if you outline the bird again to cover a pencil mark, just doing a second outline will help cover some of those things. And it's just knowing that it's a part of the process for there to be multiple coats on a given object. So don't worry. Just embrace the patience that comes with kind of covering up lines. It's all good. I'm going to go back in and add a little bit more orange. I like the small, ever so lightly, just lightly dragging the tip of the brush with a little paint creates that fun feather-like texture on top of the yellow. This is the evolution of art. It's doing one coat, letting it dry, adding another layer. That's what this feathering is. I call it feathering. I should copyright that. Just kidding. But wait until we add the black to the faces. It's really quite beautiful. We'll do that in just a minute. And then we'll add the eyes to the bird as well. Some of you may have already jumped ahead and added an eye. Okay. I'm going to stick my brush in my water cup, clean it off, give it a good swirl. I'm going to show you how to add the black to the birds now. Using a small dot of black on your plate if you don't have one already. I did not. Using a small brush of choice, a 1, a 2, a 2/0 fraction brush, whatever you have. And of course, you can do the eye for the bird. I'm going to start the bird on my right. The bird eye is just above the beak, kind of in the middle of the head for me. I'm just doing a small black eye, black circle. And then I'll do this black marking around the nose up on top. You may want to extend your beak a little bit. You can play with it. For me, I might bring my beak in a little bit more. I didn't paint enough orange. So if I grab another brush, I didn't paint enough orange beak on this bird. So I'm just going to go grab a little bit more orange. Your beak can be on your body, does not need to be, there we go. Does not need to be just on the exterior of the bird. See how I brought the beak in? I brought the beak into kind of on top of the head a little bit. That's what I was talking about. I'll probably do a second coat of orange on that beak. And the black goes on the underside. And if you want to do like a smooth brush stroke versus like feather-like texture for the black, that's fine. I did both. I kind of like having a little structure, but I like having a little bit of feathers kind of here and there too. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. And I kind of added a little mark by the eye. I don't know why, I just was inspired to do that. And I can always modify that. If it's too much orange, I can let it dry and paint orange or yellow on top of it. So I just kind of like let it sit a little bit. I'll probably reshape it a little bit with a little bit more orange, but play with that. And then I'm gonna do the other bird. Small eye. Oh, this is a big eye. And then on top of the nose. And then around this, and then it's comes down a little, there's a little bit more black on the underside of the chin and the chest for the red bird. So you can do feather-like brush strokes to kind of blend the black in. Again, if you needed to make the beak bigger, you can. You can see my Sharpie lines on my bird. That's okay. I can do a second coat of red and it will cover that right up. But it's a good learning experience of kind of checking out how to create an object, right? And my bird's a little stocky. He's a little square in areas. So if I wanted to round my bird out, I could easily do that with a little bit of more red paint. Maybe I'll do that just to show you as an example. But just know you can always change the shape of an object. Don't get discouraged. Never, never, never get discouraged. So this is where birds really start to come to life. I'm just going to grab my orange while it's wet and it's on my mind. And I'm just going to take a minute to refine my beaks as well. So everybody's kind of at their own pace right now. You're all working on something a little different. That's exactly where you should be. So you may not be doing the exact same thing I am. Don't worry about that. I'm going to just bring this in a little bit. I'll let that dry. I may reshape my red bird. We're going to do detail on the red bird in just a minute. I'm not like happy with my other bird right now. I feel like I have more detail to do, but I'm just going to let it sit and simmer here for a minute. But we're doing good on time. Just a few of the remaining steps. We're just refining some of our bird detail. And we'll add some snow as our final touch. So we're doing great on time. I'm just going to grab a little bit bigger of a brush and use my red to reshape the bird a little bit. I'm not really, he needs to be a little more round. I can also do a second coat. I think he needs to be a little bit more rounded. I want him to be a little more healthier on one side. See, even just rounding his belly out a little bit more, it looks a little bit more natural. And some cardinals are taller. Some of you may have had taller cardinals. I have short and stocky cardinals. All good. And for me to cover these lines, I'm going to need to use a little bit of white and red. So this might be a little scary, but I'm just going to come in and cover some of this up with a little bit lighter of a color. But we'll come in with our dark red in a minute here to add some detail to our red bird. But you can see I easily reshaped the belly of this bird. Could have been a little taller, but he's fine. He's kind of he's all cozy. He's got his wings tucked really deep under his belly. And he's just all settled in on this branch. That's the story I'm going to tell myself here. He's not standing up tall and looking for food. He's just eaten and he's content. Paintings can tell stories if you let your imagination be free. All right. Okay, enough of my stories. I'm going to let my bird dry and I'm going to mix a dark red color to highlight the second bird, highlight the red bird's wing, etc. So it's red and a tiny touch of black. to make a red tone. So just like how we made an orange, we are going to make a darker red color to highlight the bird's wing and add feather-like texture with a darker red. So I put a little bit of red on my plate, and I'm grabbing a small dollop of black. A little black goes a long way. And mixing that together. And you can decide how much darker you want to go. That is beautiful brick red color, which is exactly what I need. I'm going to spin my brush on the side so I have a nice fine point to work with. I'm going to start by outlining the wing. So using a dark red once you get there, you can go your own pace, so you're not going to miss anything if you're not here yet. But we're going to outline the wing. And you're just going to start to add some feather-like texture on top of the head. Maybe next to the eye. I'll bring this a little closer so you can see it. This could be a little darker. Some of you may be like, Megan, I can like barely see it. You can be as subtle with your color blending and your choice as you wish. These brush strokes are pretty thick. If I wanted to be really particular, I could do tiny little brush strokes. Maybe I'll do a little bit of the dark red kind of coming down on his chest, just a little bit down his body. This dark red is acting as a shading or as a shadow. So maybe on the underside of the body, I'll add a little bit of this dark red just to create shading. Look at that, looks really natural, doesn't it? You could even mix a third tone of red. If you wanted to maybe even make a little bit of a darker one, you could. This is totally up to you. This is where I want you to experiment. Of course, the tail, you can add in some texture on the tail. I'm going to mix a little bit of a darker red, and I'm going to go a little slower with more of a point, just so you can see some of what a third red may look like. I always try to experiment in these classes to encourage you to try to. I'm going to use a little bit of a darker red on the wing, on the edge of the wing. Ooh, baby, look at that. Little bit of a darker red gave me a little more contrast. I'm going to use this darker red on the back side of this bird too. On the back side of the head, going straight down. Like this is where the shading or the shadow is. Look at that. It made my bird stand right out off the page. A little bit of a darker red line on that left side of the bird, all the way down to the tip of the tail. This is a shading element. Maybe I'll put a few darker feathers, just peppered in. You can do as much or as little as you wish here. Okay. And it's an example of using a couple different tones of a red just to bring our bird to life. Add a little bit of shade on the underside of his belly. If that's too much, if you paint something you don't like, guess what? Let it dry and paint over it. That red was a little too dark down there for me, but guess what? I can take a little bit of the red, especially once it's dry, and I can soften it. So it's not, don't worry about that too much. Okay, so everybody's kind of working on the birds. We're at 6:44, which means we have about 15 minutes left, which is perfect. I'm going to throw in one more suggestion before we do the snow. So the additional suggestion is adding in outlining some of the holly with a little bit of a darker green. This is add a little bit of shading or shadow to the holly. This is really easy if you wanted to try it. And I'm just grabbing a small brush cleaned off to try this step. It's basically using any remaining green that you have, and you're just bringing in a tiny touch of black and creating a darker tone of holly. So I had extra green, And I'm adding in a little bit of black to create a darker tone. It's just a darker green. And you're going to pick one side of the holly, whether it's the left or the right, and you're going to do a line on the inside to add a shadow. That's it. It's just going to create a little bit of dimension for this leaf. Now, if we were spending 4 hours, we would do depth techniques to every object, but we don't have that kind of time. So if you wanted to try that, you could. Meg, thank you so much for joining. All right, but I'm just going to pick one side of the holly. Meg, don't forget to add snow to your bushes. You can watch the video. All right, so I'm just outlining one side of the holly, maybe on one swoop here, maybe on this swoop here, just to add a little bit of shading. All right. Taking my time. And this is adding I mean, this is where you might have overlapping holly too. You can use this to really bring out one or another. So this is optional. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to, but I like it because it really allows me to bring my holly to the foreground. It will start to stand out in new ways. Using a small brush is good. All right. And I'm just going to do some highlighting. If you wanted to do a lighter color versus a darker color, you could do both if you wanted to. I'm just showing you the darker color because it's kind of nice to have a shaded area. But if you wanted to do a lighter color as well as a darker color, you could. But I'm just picking one side of the holly and I'm just doing a gentle outline. You can see the difference. It's quite pretty. And it's also a great way to separate one holly that may be overlapping with another. It's kind of creating a little bit of that 3D effect. Like there's a little depth to this object. It's not a flat, boring object. It has a little bit of depth to it. There's a little bit of shading on it. So it's worth spending the time to do that if you're interested. So I'm going to take a minute just to do that. We're doing well on time. The snow does not take very long at all. So I'm just doing a little bit of the green, a darker green here and there, just some swoops. Nothing crazy. I'm just picking one or two sides of each holly just to add a little bit of that shadow. Now there's a lot more details you could do to this painting if you really are into it. You could add more depth to these berries. We will put a small white dot on the inside of each of these berries once we have our snow ready to go here. We'll do that together. That's an easy one. Just looking around, making sure that each bit of my holly just has a little bit of this green on it. And I think I'm in pretty good shape here. And I'm not overthinking this. I am keeping it simple. Can't really mess this part up. Okay. Clean off your brushes as you go. And you can continue to refine your birds. Your birds may be talking to each other. They may be focusing on different things. Your birds will always have character, always. All right. And now we're going to do snow once you're ready. Find a medium-sized brush, a 3, a 4, or 5, whatever you got handy. Let me see what I have here. I think I had a 3. I think I used a 3. Excuse me, previous. See if I can find it. I'm just going to use this one right here. All right. And you're going to have you want some clean, you want your brush to be clean, and you want to have some fresh white paint. So some of you are probably running out of white. Some of you may not be. Use white in a lot of different ways in tonight's class. So luckily I sent a pretty good sized tube of white paint for you to use. So what you're going to do for snow is this. You're going to grab your paint brush, and you kind of want to wipe off some of it so it's not too thick and goopy. But as you're doing this, if you wanted to add in like any more holly, I know we didn't do that, but if anybody wants to add in any more holly, if you feel like you have any gaps where you need more holly, like in the middle, I'll just give you an example of what that could look like really quick. So for me, I do want to add like just another piece of holly right here in the middle. And I'm just going to connect it to this one. I'm going to fill it in. For me, I want my bush to be filled in a little bit more. So see, I'm just kind of connecting this. It's all good. And I can do some, I can add in more green on this, but maybe I lean back on my chair. I want you to make sure you have enough holly filled in areas. Maybe I'll add just one more piece on the underside of this bird. The reason I'm doing this now before the snow is because I'm going to probably put snow on top of this. Okay. So I'm just kind of filling out the middle a little bit. If I wanted to kind of connect some of these, I easily could do that. Just use your eye so you're happy with the amount of fill that you have, really. It's like for me, I have a little bit of a gap right here. I'm going to add just like a little piece of holly here. So I would just kind of filled that whole middle space in just by adding a couple pieces. You could consider that if you wanted to. And I can come in and make these look a little more pretty. But for me, that helped visually to kind of create that bush-like atmosphere. And I could add more down here on the bottom, and I may do that. But you can see I kind of filled it in the middle. For me, that's what I wanted. But the snow is really quite fun. The snow can be as thick as you wish. In the inspiration, the snow is so thick. But I'm basically going to add snow to the top side of some of the holly. So I'm going to put some snow up here, and I'm just going to do a healthy dollop of snow on top of the holly. See, that's a healthy dollop. I'm going to put it on the top side here. I'm going to go right next to the bird. It's a healthy dollop of snow right there on that petal. So anywhere the snow may land, so use your imagination. Anywhere the snow may land, this is the top side of this. You know, maybe there's snow. And the bird definitely needs to be sitting on some snow. So I'm going to put like a snowy bunch under this bird. This bird is tucked in. He had a big meal and he is just chilling on this plop of snow right here. Okay. But you can just do a little white highlighting here and there on the top side of the holly. And don't overthink it. Just like we did with the green. Find the top side of each piece of holly and just do a healthy brush stroke. I'm doing a healthy brush stroke. I'm using, what brush is this? This is like a small flat-headed brush. You can use any size brush you want. I'm doing a healthy brush stroke because this scene, it just had a major snowstorm and there is a good amount of snow on these branches. So use your imagination. Where would snow land? Snow would land here. Snow would land here. If anyone has to leave, Julie, no problem. Thank you so much. Any notes folks want to leave in the chat if you have to leave early, no big deal. I will be emailing the recording out where it was requested. But just add in a little snow here and there. And then we'll do dots for snow. So if anybody has to leave soon, we'll be doing dots for like snowflakes on top of everything, which is quite lovely. And you could do 2 coats of snow, 2 coats of white if you have it on top of the holly. So you can see it's really creating this fun snowy atmosphere. You could also do more snow on top of the holly. I've been going on top of each leaf, but if you wanted to like really make some pillows, you could cover up some of the holly. So like as an example, this one right here, I did it right on top. I'm going to come down on top of the holly just a little bit, just to make a little bit more of a snowy plop for the bird. So you can decide how much or how little snow you may want to add. But the snow coming down from the sky helps tremendously. Also on top of the branch, there's snow. So you could do a little bit of snow on the top side of the branch. See that? I did a little snow on the top side of the branch. I'm using a thicker brush because I was going for like a thicker snow. If you want it to be really petite and do very tiny brush strokes, you can use a smaller brush. I like the heaping of snow. This is what I want to happen in Vermont. I want it to snow so I can go skiing. So have fun with that. Right. And then we'll do we're doing perfect on timing. We're right at our 2 hours almost. I'm gonna lean back in my chair and think about where else I might need to add snow. I don't need to go too crazy. But you can see it's definitely more snowy, which I love. And then if anybody wants to do snow, you can use the round end of your brush, the round wooden end of your brush, and you can use white paint, dip the end of your brush in, and you can do little dots all over to create snowflakes. If you do light dots, like you touch the brush, the tip down lightly, you'll get smaller dots, you'll get smaller snowflakes. If you dab it hard, you'll get a bigger snowflake. So you can play with that technique as well. But I kind of like stirring it, so I have a nice little point typically at the end. So see how there's like a little point on the end? That gives me a nice tiny snowflake if I want a tiny one. But I do clusters of snowflakes, like a cluster of 2, a cluster of 1. Try making it look a little natural. I saw somebody do snowflakes on top of the birds yesterday. It looks really cool. I'm so glad you like this, Candace. Thank you so much for joining. You could do little snowflakes on the birds if you wanted to, like it's snowing on the cardinals. I'm doing it just to be courageous. There we go. You could do snowflakes on the holly, like it's actively snowing. So you can have fun with the snow, but the snow is just, it makes this painting so well-rounded, so beautiful. If anyone has any remaining questions, do not hesitate to ask. Most importantly, I hope you enjoyed yourself tonight. If you'd like a copy of tonight's recording, feel free to drop your email in the chat box. And